Hello, good evening, and welcome to a Holyrood Sources podcast special. We are live outside the Scottish Parliament for our first ever live stream. So thank you if you've joined us live on YouTube, we really appreciate that. And if you're listening back on the podcast as usual, hi, thank you so much for listening. I'm Calum Macdonald, hello. This is Geoff Aberdein, who was Chief of Staff to the First Minister Alex Salmond. Hello, Geoff.
Hello.
And this is Andy Maciver, who was Director of Communications for the Scottish Conservatives. Hello, Andy.
Good evening.
We, of course, are here. It's Friday, the 8th of May. It's just gone 7 o'clock, and so we are bringing you the remaining results that we will over the next hour or so while we're live with you on YouTube. But we're also reflecting on the fact that the SNP have won this Scottish parliamentary election, although it looks unlikely that they're going to reach a majority. Lots more conversation on that to come. What does this mean for the Scottish Labour Party and for Anas Sarwar as well, who I think it's fair to say will be pretty deflated, discouraged. What went wrong in his campaign? We'll analyse a bit of that too. We've got guests dropping by throughout the course of our special this evening. You'll hear from former SNP MP Joanna Cherry. You'll hear from the pollster Mark Diffley. You'll hear from Wendy Chamberlain, Liberal Democrat of course, among others, we hope, as well. So do stay with us. Post your comments on YouTube. We'll read some of those out as we get going as well. We're so glad for you joining us on our first ever live stream, guys.
It is.
This is all right, isn't it?
First of many.
Okay. Is what you were going to say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So thank you so much for joining us. Right, let's get into this. Geoff, first of all, big picture, the result, the SNP are going to, well, they're going to win. They're going to be the largest party, but not reaching a majority. What's your take?
Yeah, as listeners will know, I've never been, confident the SNP would get an outright majority. Have to say, it's a stunning result for the SNP. If we think about the last 5 years in particular, the difficulties that the party has encountered, whether it be party finances, whether it be the Salmond Sturgeon fallout, whether it be Humza Yousaf, as short term as First Minister, and the destabilising of the Green relationship, it's not been without its problems. And yet John Swinney's come in almost 2 years ago today, with Kate Forbes as his deputy, and they've managed to kind of shift enough public perception. I say enough because I think there's still a lot of work to do there in order to have a platform to succeed. Now, they've been benefiting from the fact that there's been a bit of a reform surge, the emergence of reform in Scottish politics, and also a very, very unpopular Labour UK government. But nonetheless, you can only beat what's in front of you, and John deserves huge credit for this success today.
I should just say it's just gone 7 o'clock, and we're still waiting for a few constituency results to come in. So Inverness and Nairn, Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch, and Uddingston and Bells Hill still to declare. So 3 constituency results still to go. And then, of course, there's the regional list results on top of that as well. Andy, what's your take on how things stand? So as we're speaking, the SNP on 55, the Lib Dems on 6, the Conservatives on 4, Labour on 3, the Scottish Greens on 2, and of course we're waiting for 59 seats still to be filled.
Yeah, and I think just my kind of public service announcement, again, like the other day, I know the broadcasters today have been obsessed with the majority question, and that's, to a degree, that's the SNP's fault as well, because, they put the goalposts where they put the goalposts. This is the Scottish Parliament. This is proportional representation. The SNP, even if they don't win a single other seat, and they will win Uddingston for sure, they might lose those 2 in the Highlands. The Lib Dems are pretty confident in both of those, and we'll ask Wendy when she comes on. If they don't win another seat, it's a landslide.
Yeah.
It's a landslide. In any other terminology, this is what we would call it, because that's the way this system works. What that does, I think, is it raises a really important question for the opposition parties. The SNP have been in power for 20 years. It's now going to be 25 years. They're not actually very popular, 25% approval rating. They haven't done a particularly good job. I mean, they're better now since John and Kate Forbes took over, but they haven't done that good a job. Why on earth can they not be beaten? This is not normal for a democratic country. It's quite normal for countries that don't have democracy. It's not really normal for a democratic country. The opposition have now got to look themselves in the mirror and say, what on earth is going on in Scotland? Why can't we beat a government that isn't popular? It's not the SNP's fault.
No.
As you said, they can only beat what's in front of them.
Yeah.
What's in front of them is not good enough. And that is actually the problem that now they've got to answer.
Yeah, and I thought John Swinney said something interesting in the recent days, where he said that all the opposition parties were basically saying, vote us to stop the SNP, as opposed to vote us because we are going to do this positive intervention for the benefit of the people of Scotland. And I feel that that was a fundamental error in the opposition party psyche and their approach to this election. But you raise an important question, and it links back to the Constitution, of course. How much did John Swinney's tactic of saying, well, vote for us for an outright majority, that will lead to independence, how much did that motivate the pro-independence support to rallying behind the SNP? And conversely, now that they haven't reached that threshold, or we don't think they have, we need to wait and see the list votes, but it doesn't seem likely.
I don't think they can.
Yeah, I don't think
they can't. They can't.
So in that case, how does John Swinney then navigate the next 5 years with a pro-independence majority, likely, with the Greens on the list, and yet has set his own threshold about that outright majority? How do you actually develop that argument in this context? That's the big unknown in this, in where we find ourselves today.
And of course, there are glimmers of, Andy, what you're saying, of the opposition rallying enough support. I mean, just in the last few minutes, for example, the Lib Dems have won in Caithness and Sutherland, winning from the SNP, which means that Marie Todd, who was the Scottish Government's Drugs and Alcohol Minister, is unseated. So there are glimmers of the opposition cutting through against the SNP directive.
Actually, she'll probably get back in on the list, to be honest.
Right, fair enough.
Marie Todd's number 1 on the Highlands and Islands list, and because the SNP have lost a number of Highlands and Islands seats, she'll probably get back in. However, that's not the point that you're making. Glimmers of hope, okay. But it's been 20 years.
I get
it's not, glimmers of hope are supposed to come after 5 years, after one term. After 20 years, it's a little late for glimmers of hope. After 20 years, you're supposed to replace the government that's been in for that long. That's what happens in democracies. I mean, who else? Angela Merkel was maybe about that length of time, I think. But this is democratically unknown, and that's the worry. It's not a worry for the SNP. Fine, they've another landslide, another massive victory. But it's a bit of a worry for democracy and for debate, I think, because we are not getting enough of that in the building behind us. The opposition is too weak, and the electorate has delivered their verdict on the opposition again, which is that we don't like the government much, but we like you even less. That's what they're saying.
Let's bring into the conversation Joanna Cherry, former SNP MP. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Calum.
How
it's lovely to be
see
here.
You. Thank you so much for stopping by to our first ever live stream. In fact.
It's a nice studio, huh?
It's all right,
It's
isn't it?
very nice, yeah.
We don't even have a licence fee to pull this off, but we still manage, with thanks to the Scotch Whisky Association, by the way. More on that later. Joanna, how are you reflecting on the SNP returning to power at Holyrood?
Well, it's not exactly a surprise, is it? I think, all the opinion polls had predicted that the SNP would be the largest party by a significant amount. The real question is, are they going to get an outright majority? Looks very unlikely. The SNP is the party of independence. They have, in my opinion, foolishly perilled an independence mandate on getting an outright majority, which they're not going to get. But of course, there is going to be a pro-independence majority in the Parliament, and I'll be very interested to see what the SNP do with that, how they dig themselves out of the hole they've dug themselves into on mandate, but more importantly, what they do when they ask for another Section 30 order and Westminster says no. What is the plan? I don't believe that there is a plan, and that's why I've been such a trenchant critic, because for many years I and others in the party felt it was very foolish to frame the debate in terms of whether or not you could get another Section 30 order. Section 30 is a creature of a statute, 28 years old. The Union's 300 years old. Devolution's a modern phenomenon. The Union is much older than that. The idea that only a devolved statute could provide the mechanism to bring the Union to an end, to my mind, is crazy. But unfortunately, the SNP have reversed themselves up a bit of a blind alley on that, and how they get out of it is not an easy thing to answer. But that should not detract from the fact that the constitutional question is still very much at the heart of Scottish politics. The country's split down the middle, but it's not going away.
Should it be? So this is the other part of this, because the result from Wales has got Plaid Cymru soaring, doing very well. And actually their leader, Rhys Iorwerth, has put independence for Wales actually into the distance. He says he wants to set up a commission. He wants to work at the next few years at getting towards convincing the argument, which was a strategy that was used in the past. Is that what the SNP should do now? But
Plaid are copying Alex Salmond's strategy and Geoff's strategy from nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was a very different set of circumstances. Plaid are coming fresh to power. Whatever you could say about the SNP, they're not very fresh at the moment. And as you've just been describing, one of the things that's delivered this victory for them, despite a significant drop in their vote share, is the fragmentation of their opposition. It is not a ringing endorsement on any view, but nevertheless the arithmetic is we're going to have a pro-independence majority in the Parliament, and as a matter of democracy that can't be ignored.
But I agree with that last point, by the way. I agreed with it in 2021 as well, to be honest with you. I think there's a mandate issue here, and I think there should have been a referendum last time, and I think there should be one now because there's a mandate. However, my question was not going to be that. My question was going to be, as an independent supporter, would you want a referendum anytime soon? I mean, strategically...
No, strategically I would not.
Yeah, OK. Yeah.
Because the SNP... In 2014, when we had the first independence referendum, the SNP were riding high on a huge wave of public support because they were viewed as having been a very successful and competent government which had governed with integrity. That is not the view of the current SNP. The government has not, they've not been a competent government. They haven't governed with integrity. They've been dogged by scandals. If we want to give Scots the confidence to believe in Scotland's ability to govern itself, we need a devolved government which governs competently, and I'm afraid that is not the SNP and has not been the SNP for at least the last 8 or 9 years.
Would you say that the competency has increased post Swinney and Forbes?
I think, you know, I think Kate Forbes gave the SNP a degree of credibility with the business community, which it's now sadly lacking. There are other able people like Ivan McKee, and I'd like to see people like Ivan come to the fore. I think John Swinney's been favoured by a fractured opposition. If it wasn't for the emergence of reform in Scotland and the woeful failures of Labour in government at Westminster, John probably wouldn't have won this election. So I don't think the election should be put down to great leadership by John. He's been a lucky general rather than a good general.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a combination of what Joanna says, but also I think you have to, at least I do, acknowledge that 2 years ago today, I would have thought absolutely certain that the SNP were on a hiding to nothing in this election. I would have thought they'd been wiped off the map. Genuinely, I thought things were that bad with the public perception of things as well. So, I don't doubt that there's been a degree of luck and happenstance that's really favoured John, but I actually think, in fairness to him, he has actually managed to keep his party together. Now, we've discussed on the podcast, that might not necessarily have been always in the interests of the country, but he recognised he needed to try and keep, a core of his party together. The challenge for him now, and it's a total change of mindset, because he's about to be elected First Minister on his mandate. How are things going to be different? Is he going to focus on the country more or continue in the party? And I would suggest that he has to do the former. He has to focus on the country more, and that's what's going to be really interesting, I think. And, I'll say one final thing. Andy's pointed it out, 19 years in government, facing up to 24, 25 years in government. Normally after an election victory like this, you get a period of grace. I just don't think that's going to exist. You need to hit the ground running. So that's going to start with his personnel. Who's he going to put around the cabinet? Who's he going to try and elevate and say, this is my team? And secondly, what's his policy agenda? What's going to be his priorities to say, things are going to be different? I'm going to do this and do this with conviction. And that's what I would advise him to do. Whether he can do that or not is yet to be seen.
Joanna?
I mean, I agree with Geoff, but I fear that's not going to happen, because I'm afraid to say that John Swinney is a party before country person, and he's very invested in a degree of continuity from the Sturgeon era, and he's not prepared to acknowledge the failings of that era. And the SNP needs a leader who can make a break with that era, who can acknowledge the failings in governance, the lack of internal democracy in the party, the failure to deliver independence, and the failure to deliver competent government and to deliver on policy promises. And I just don't see John doing that. If he does, I will be delighted. But I think he is a party man to the core. What Scotland needs at the moment is a leader who puts the country first, not their party.
But I think we need to give him a chance to do that. And if he did do it, Joanna, is it something personally you would say, right, okay, you're not going to agree with everything, nobody ever does, but if he did do what you're describing, is it something that would bring you back into the fold in the SNP in any way? What does the future hold for you in Scottish political discourse?
I mean, I'm enjoying being an observer of politics. My life has got a lot better since I lost my seat 2 years ago. I'm really enjoying being back in my career. I'm really enjoying being out of what was a deeply unpleasant environment for me within the SNP because of the views I held on various issues. I asked John Swinney, John reached out to me when he became leader, because John and I have known each other since we were teenagers. We set up the Young Scottish Nationalists in Edinburgh in the late 80s with Ian Blackford. John reached out to me, and I told John that he would not have my support unless he reached out to the women who had been alienated by the policy of self-identification, and he spoke with the women who were taking the government to the Supreme Court. He's not had the courage to do that, and he would have to have the courage to do that to make me consider rejoining the party. He would also need to reach out. I mean, I'm not the only person that's left the SNP. One of the reasons it's been easier for John to reunite the party is because so many of us have left. The party is a rump of what it was 6 or 7 years ago. And I would like to see him reaching out to all the women and men who've left the party. You know, one of the reasons Angus Robertson's lost his seat in Edinburgh Central is that a once great branch of the SNP, a once vibrant branch, I was a member of it, Edinburgh Central, has been utterly hollowed out in recent years by some of the identity politics that Angus Robertson supporters brought with them to the branch. So that's not the only problem in the party, but it is symptomatic of all the problems in the party, because it's about failure to listen, failure to accept when you've lost an argument, and failure to try and bring people with you. So it's very symptomatic of everything that's been wrong with the SNP over the last decade. And John would need to address that before people like me would consider rejoining.
I suppose, though, Angus Robertson has lost to somebody who does subscribe to those gender ideologies, perhaps, that you've just called out in Lorna Slater.
Yes, but I think lots of people vote for Greens because they care about the environment. They're worried about climate change. The Greens don't advertise their identitarian politics on their leaflets because they're not actually that popular, and that's not just my opinion. All polls show that the view that any man can become a woman and any woman who disputes that should be treated appallingly, most of the public don't agree with that. Yeah. So I don't think that's why people voted for Lorna Slater. You'd have to ask them why they voted, but I think part of the problem was there's a lot of young people and students in the constituency who are very angry with Angus Robertson for his closeness to the current Israeli government, which a lot of people, young people, and I, not a young person, but I agree with them. I believe the current Israeli government has behaved appallingly in Gaza and now in the West Bank. And I think lots of people were disgusted by Angus's closeness to them.
It's really interesting to hear your take, Joanna. Thank you very much for joining us. I should ask, how's the book? How's the book going?
Well, it's doing rather. And my agent tells me it's doing very well.
That's good.
And it's not had any bad reviews yet, apart from a couple of nameless spokespersons in the SNP, the same kind of people who say that Jeffrey never smiles, and we can see him smiling now. So yeah, no, it's been quite well received.
Give it a plug.
And, it's called Keeping the Dream Alive, and it's a memoir of my 10 years in politics, and it's available from all good booksellers, and the audio book read by me, if you're an insomniac, will be coming out soon.
Very good. Joanna, we're very grateful for you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so more power to your elbow.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Joanna Cherry, thank you for taking the time. Geoff, it is nice to see you smiling.
Yes.
So we should just note that. Really
happens rarely.
That's what I've heard. Really fascinating to hear Joanna's thoughts. Who, obviously a known kind of critic of the SNP in the kind of Sturgeon onwards era, but still an important
I don't know
take.
when to keep moving, but I wanted to ask Joanna, and I think she puts forward, everyone's got their own views, but, fundamentally, people have voted for the proposition that John Swinney put forward. Yeah. And it has worked. And again, I think he deserves huge credit for that.
I think the counterfactual here, I mean, we'll never know, but I think it's interesting. I mean, my own view, and we've talked about it before, is I do think that John Swinney and Kate Forbes have made a very, very substantial difference.
I agree.
To the party and to the running of the government. And I think you can see that in the polls. It wasn't just a stabilisation, it was an uptick. And as we stand here just now, they're at almost 40%.
Which is way above most polls, actually.
So, I think you have to give them a lot of credit for that. And I fundamentally do think that the Swinney government is a substantially better government than what went before. Obviously, as you say, Joanna, is a well-known critic of it. Yeah. I think when you were asking her, though, there was just a hint that I think she did feel it was a bit better.
Trying to get that out. She wouldn't say it, but I think she might have thought it.
I think she might have thought it. I do think she thinks it might be slightly better than what was there before. But again, as we said before, this is not on John Swinney. This is on the opposition. You know, this is ultimately that's the situation.
Well, your thoughts are welcome on that if you want to agree or disagree with Andy. Just before we continue with the podcast, let me tell you that this special episode of Holyrood Sources is sponsored by the Scotch Whisky Association. Scotch whisky is one of Scotland's greatest success stories, an iconic product that's a vital global export and a major employer. With these elections now over and MSPs heading back to the Scottish Parliament, the Scotch whisky industry is calling for the new Parliament to support investment in sustainability and tourism, to protect jobs and ensure Scotland remains an attractive place to do business and trade around the world. Whisky makes Scotland, and this Parliament can help the industry and the country thrive. You can find out more at scotch-whisky.org.uk. We're grateful to the Scotch Whisky Association for making all of this popular. Popular? Happen. What was I trying to say there? I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. Let's not worry about it.
Yeah.
We're going to move on. Can I just take us a little bit inside on stuff? Just because Anna Sarwar conceded this election after 7 seat declarations. How does that? Why did he do that? What did he know? So what did he see? What did he know that we didn't at that point? Or that wasn't public at that point?
I think we did as well. You only have to wait for... I mean, he was known yesterday, to be honest.
Yeah, fair.
You only have to wait for 2 or 3 constituencies and you can see what the vote share is looking like and you know...
And you extrapolate
Yeah,
from that.
of course you do. And you know what sort of areas the constituencies have come up in and therefore you know what's going to happen in the other. Ultimately, Anas Sarwar knew that the only way for him to actually win the election was to win a lot of constituencies. That's the Labour strategy. The Labour strategy never depended on the list. The Labour strategy was about winning central belt urban constituencies. If the vote share makes it clear he's not doing that, which everybody knew he wasn't going to do it anyway, then why not? I thought he did well by just coming out and saying, you know,
is it not in Anas's nature, right? He's been on a podcast a few times, and what I love about him, and he's very punchy, he's energetic, and he does shoot from the hip quite a lot. And I just think it's in his nature. He thought, well, what's the point in playing some sort of game of let's wait and see what the votes say? You know, no, I'm being asked a question, I'll just say it. And I thought fair play to him. It's quite a different way of doing things. Because, you know, they've had some successes tonight. It should be noted. The Western Isles came out of nowhere, frankly.
Yeah, that's true.
I would imagine Torquil Crichton's done a great job as MP in helping the candidate.
It was also all or nothing for Anas. Anas is not interested in coming second. I mean, you want to be First Minister.
And he said that throughout, and he was very bullish on our podcast. But look, let's be clear. We could talk about some of the, you know, the rights and wrongs of his individual campaign, like we could with any campaign. He's fundamentally lost any chance of winning this, right? A chance of winning it because of circumstances out with his control, and that is, of course, the performance of the Labour government at Westminster.
And I absolutely do not think that Anas Sarwar should resign as leader.
Do you not?
No.
So that's the next. That's the next kind of discussion.
I absolutely do not think that he should. But I actually think he is there.
Unless he wants to. I mean,
sure, you might want to, because leaders normally do when this happens to them,
if
right?
I was in this position, I'd be thinking,
yeah, because what does his role look like in the new Parliament? You know?
Well, by the way, I mean, we've got to wait till apparently the list votes are heavily, heavily delayed, so we've got to wait for a long time.
We're not staying on air for that, because I'm
looking at the vote shares, I mean, at the moment, if the constituency votes translate into list votes, Labour could well come second and Reform third. So the answer to what does he do in the next Parliament? Well, he could be first up at First Minister's questions every week, right? He could be the leader of the largest opposition party.
That's a fair point.
And incidentally as well, I'm not trying to say Anas Sarwar did well, right? I'm not, but what I am saying is it's not his fault, and frankly, his vote share at the moment is about 1 or 2% down. We're about to get Mark Diffley on. We'll talk about percentages with Mark, but his vote share is 1 or 2% down on what it was in 2021. Against the backdrop of this Labour government, that's not that bad.
Well, the other bit
that's
of it
not that bad.
is if Starmer does go, which is like not out with the realms of possibility at this point, and Sarwar's held on, then he's got a whole new breath of fresh air. You know, doesn't he to kind of ride out on for the next spell, at least?
Let's pretend we're vote share experts, just as Mark Diffley comes onto the podcast.
Exactly.
This is a good idea.
Mark Diffley. Mark Diffley from the Diffley Partnership, polling expert, is here. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Thanks for joining our first ever live stream.
Oh, lovely.
We're having a nice time.
Nice evening for it.
Yeah, it's kind of almost out, isn't it?
Great.
Right, break it down for us, Mark. What... I suppose, give us the headline stats as far as what is interesting you this evening? What has caught your eye, your attention?
So I think the first thing to say is, and I suppose I would say this, wouldn't I, but the polling has come out of this pretty well, I think, as we, both in terms of the national vote share, which I think is going to be pretty much totally within the margin of error, looking at it now, with only 3 seats left, that's not going to change particularly. So I think we can be pretty pleased with that. And I think the kind of central projection here which was that the SNP would win, but be, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 seats short of a majority, is going to be pretty spot on. I think. So I think that's the headline. As far as
Callum, can I just read very briefly? I was sitting next to Mark, right, in the BBC studio, right, and he's got a sheet of all his predictions, right, and out of nowhere he'd go, yes, he's like, one for deflating.
So to be clear, regardless of who won.
Absolutely. You couldn't care less, as long as prediction was right.
Yeah.
And then I said, oh look, North East 5 looks like it's going to the SNP. And he went, what? We were almost caught on camera.
It's a big day for pollsters to
No,
try and get it right.
I mean, yeah, and I'm not just saying this, but it is. I mean, increasingly, I think elections are hard to call, particularly on a kind of seat by seat level. And we didn't get all of them right, but I think we'll have ended up getting the vast majority of them right. The ones I think that were quite surprising, there are a few. I think Shetland was a genuine surprise
that's an SNP game.
To everyone. The Western Isles was a bit of a surprise in the kind of the opposite direction. The SNP lost that.
They're both proper local issue campaigns.
I was going to say.
I think so. Yeah.
That's a really good point.
No, I think so. So they were the two sort of
good
big.
pollster would probably have called it.
Yeah.
And the ones where we missed out, I think, were by and large kind of we had as kind of toss-ups anyway.
Yeah, fair.
So
just on vote share, what sort of percentage are we looking at here for the SNP?
The last time I looked, it looks like it's about 37%, which is a bit at the upper end of where the polls were. The final ones sort of coalesce around sort of 35.
The final ones that were taken into account the fact that Greens weren't standing in constituencies were further up towards that sort of number.
Yeah, I mean, our sort of seat projection was based on the average of the last 5 polls being 36.2%, I think. And so I think that's going to be within a percentage or 1.5% of the final tally with constituencies.
Can I ask you? Well, I mean, we don't know because we obviously haven't seen any regional votes at all. Because I don't know why the council have taken so long.
Lothian's about to.
Is about to do.
Yeah, about to do. Yeah.
It looks, and the same seems to be true in Wales to a degree as well. But Reform have just underperformed really where it looked like they might be. Have you seen anything in your data and in your analysis as to why that might be? Are people just deciding it's just a bit too much tax across the box, maybe when they thought they might? Or?
I do think we need to see the list results, right? Yeah. I mean, because they're going to do pretty well, I think, on the regional list. Now, there was a chance that they might win 1 or 2 constituencies. I think Banff and Buchan, which, back to Geoff's point, we did. That was one of the ones I was crowing over earlier on. But actually, that was a genuine sort of toss of the coin, and they did get within a few hundred votes, I think, of that.
But they're only at like 16%.
16%. I think latterly the polls were kind of they did come down slightly. So I think sort of 16-17% is where they're at. And of course, if they do that on the regional list, they'll get sort of 2 in every region and probably 3 in a couple. You're looking at, I would say, sort of 17, 18 seats.
So if you put your money on one, who would be the second place party in Holyrood, do you think?
Well, I think that's a really difficult shout, but I do. I mean, Labour slightly overperformed on the constituencies.
Oh right, okay.
And so I think I still think Reform maybe by 1 or 2. I mean, we spoke during the campaign, Geoff and I, about Labour's lack of a second vote strategy, which I think may come back to haunt them slightly.
Although again, that was deliberate.
Well, I think
because
so.
Because it was all based on winning constituencies in the central belt in the heavily packed urban areas.
Yeah, no, totally.
Sure, Andy,
it was a real regional campaign for them, not a national campaign.
Yeah, I want to come in here because I don't think the SNP had a particularly good second vote strategy as well. And actually, your polling analysis identified that kind of a big drop off of the list. So just imagine in a circumstance where some of these seats that you're talking about, Mark, that have been on a knife edge, if the SNP hadn't won them, they weren't going to pick them up probably on the list. Or we'll wait and see the numbers, obviously. Sure. Yeah. And I think if I were a Labour strategist, SNP strategists, Tory, literally everyone bar like the Greens who've really fought on that basis and particularly Reform. Where's the second vote strategy? Yeah. And to be clear for our listeners and viewers, John Swinney was the least unpopular leader. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The most relatively popular. And I just wonder, why did they not put John Swinney for First Minister like we did with Alex Salmond? Because at least that would have crystallised the vote. I don't know if you realise where you guys vote. I don't know where you were voting. It was like 15 names, 15
Oh, yeah,
options on the list.
22.
22, and you're like, oh, and you're like, make something stand out to me, And I just, I think a learning curve for all parties actually is, second vote strategies are important.
I was looking for the Socialist Workers' Party, but I just couldn't quite find it, unfortunately. So I had to go elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I think for the SNP, their list their regional list share towards the end, it didn't quite fall off a cliff, but it absolutely it nosedived, right? In one poll I think it was 23%, which was at the low end, but nonetheless. And that actually I don't think that's going to be in the end. That's not going to be the difference between getting a majority or not, because I think they'll get either 57 or 58 seats with the 3 left. Either 57 or 58 from the last 3, but the maximum they'll get, I think, is two list seats. They might get one in Edinburgh now, having lost so many.
Well, I was just going to say,
maybe one in Highland.
Can I just have one follow-up?
Just
Mark, the Greens have performed pretty well in this election on winning constituencies. It's just well done to them. That's quite a breakthrough. Where do you put their list vote? Where do you think they'll be in seats? Could they be challenging for second? Exactly.
Well, they absolutely could, I think. We had them at 16 overall, so slightly behind Labour and Reform, but only by a seat or 2.
Wow.
Right. They could be third.
Can I just say
I'm not saying that with any great level of confidence, but it is so tight.
The slickness of this live stream falls apart when Calum tries to show me what he's written on his notepad, and I've got utterly no idea what it says.
Well,
something about the Greens.
I can barely read it, so a special mention to producer Tim, who is now typing it out in front of me as I speak to you. So, Tim, just keep me right. These are the list numbers for Edinburgh region, yes. So
Wendy Chamberlain
give us a thumbs up.
Well, I don't know why.
We'll hear from Wendy in a second.
I'm joking, Wendy. We'll get you on in a sec. Right, here are the numbers. SNP, 69,000 and a bit. Scottish Greens, 67,877.
Wow.
Labour, 58,696. The Lib Dems, 42,937. Reform, 33,341. And the Conservatives, 29,223. So we think that's Reform with 2 seats out of that stack.
That's good. That's good.
Conservatives with 2.
Lothians, that is quite good.
So your view is that's good for Reform?
Well, I think this is their weakest region.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Interesting. There you are. Sorry. These are the numbers. We're working out the seat extrapolation.
Oh,
I think Mid Scotland and Fife as well. We're just speaking to producer Tim here. I think Mid Scotland and Fife is gone as well. We might find something else.
Your initial reaction to that is that's actually good for Reform, even though they've come 4th or 5th in the.
I absolutely think so. Mid Scotland.
And just on Mid Scotland and Fife, so the seats for Mid Scotland and Fife: Reform UK 2, Labour 2, Conservatives 2, and the Scottish Greens 1.
And that is absolutely what
you're feeling pretty good about yourself now. You pat yourself on the back. This is what he was doing in BBC.
Did you see the Greens won in Mid Scotland and Fife?
Mid Scotland got the Scottish Greens got 1 in Mid Scotland and Fife.
I think they were actually hoping for 2 in Mid Scotland and Fife.
Hang on just a sec, because in Edinburgh and Lothians, the Scottish Greens have got 3.
Told you.
Labour have got 2.
I'm sorry.
Reform have got 1, and the Conservatives have got 1.
So 3 for the Greens, even though they've won a constituency as well, Mark.
So the point here is the SNP lost how many in Edinburgh? My mind's a bit
frustrated. They lost 4 constituencies in Edinburgh.
But they've not got a list seat.
They didn't get a list seat.
Because their list vote just fell
off the cliff, as you said.
And that, if you don't have a second vote strategy, that's always the risk, right? That's always.
But they've had a lot of criticism in the past by other independent supporters for the both votes SNP strategy.
And they'll be coming in for that again.
But they'll also be saying, well, look what happens. Of course we should have a both votes SNP strategy because we'd have got more seats then.
And I suspect if they don't get one in Lothians,
you know what I mean?
They won't get one at all.
Yeah.
There's a chance in Highland, I guess, but we're still waiting for a couple
of results. And South Scotland?
Maybe they got one in South
Scotland
last time, didn't they?
And Highlands as well.
So it's possible, but so I would say they're going to end up at either 58 or 59 would be what I would say now.
Fair enough.
And that
we said 56.
So again, Mark, just talking a little bit about Labour here. I mean, again, Labour's obviously had a bad result, but they're overperforming. I mean, Labour have won 2 regional seats in Edinburgh and Lothians, as well as having won Daniel Johnson's constituency. That's a good result for Labour, relatively speaking. And they've well outpolled Reform in Edinburgh and Lothians as well. Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of parties clustered on 17, 18, 19 seats, basically, is what you're saying, and we'll have to see who might nudge ahead to be second place.
How many did Labour get in Lothian?
So it's Edinburgh and Lothians East, and Labour got 2. That's what you mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
Result for Labour.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
result for Labour is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
consensus there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Other ones to watch then, if we got, so we're kind of waiting, we're just waiting for, hang on, I'm just looking at the tally. We've had 84 of 129 seats allocated. Okay, good. So we've got currently, as we speak, which is at 7:37 on Friday evening, the SNP are on 55, Labour on 7, Conservatives on 7, Lib Dems on 6, the Greens on 6, and Reform UK on 3.
So I think the 3 constituencies left, if I'm not wrong, are Uddingston,
Yeah.
which that'll be
That's
SNP.
SNP.
Inverness, which I think Fergus has conceded.
Fergus
but I think
Ewing has, yeah.
but I think is still pretty much a toss-up between the Lib Dems.
Wendy's looking at us seriously because we're talking about Inverness
have to
and
get
now we're
Wendy on
talking
in a
about
sec.
Sky
And
beating
so
a
maybe
couple of
bring her
cameras.
on, I
We're
think.
going to try and see the eye signals from Wendy. Who's winning these 2 seats, Wendy?
And Sky, which
Yeah.
I think Geoff and I are probably speaking to the same person there, she's telling us that it's absolutely on a knife edge.
Yeah.
At least I got
Yeah,
that
it really
message
is, yeah.
about
So
5 minutes,
in that
5
case,
minutes
the SNP floor in this election then is basically 56.
yeah, because they're 50. Yeah.
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 So the floor is 56, maybe up to 58, 59,
58,
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But if they get 58, it'll be because they get the last 2 constituency seats in the Highlands, so they won't get a list vote in the Highlands. So yeah, I would say 57, 58 is.
Yeah.
So 58 now is probably now we know the Lothian
Probably the
regional
ceiling,
result.
yeah.
That's probably the ceiling.
Mark,
So,
that is so helpful. What a great time we've had. Thank you very, very
Thank
much
you, Mark.
indeed.
All right,
And
see you
get
soon.
back to your
See you.
charts and go and celebrate and have a sleep or
yeah,
whatever.
or to the pub.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll see you
soon.
there.
Yeah.
Cheers, Mark. That is Mark Diffley from Diffley Partnership, leading pollster, of course.
Just while Wendy's coming over,
Yeah.
Actually, Geoff would have read it because I know he reads my Herald columns on the train. But
Religiously.
I did mention this morning in the Herald that I feel from a parliamentary point of view and from a debate and policy point of view, having the SNP at that kind of 57, 58 mark, I think is quite helpful because it forces them into more collaboration than 62, 63 otherwise would, I think. Be my tuppence worth
Yes.
on that.
Very interesting. Right, well, let's welcome the much advertised and
God.
very patient Wendy Chamberlain, Lib Dem MP for North East Fife. Good
Yes.
evening.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's great
No,
to
not
see
at all.
you as well. How are you feeling today? What's the kind of story of the Lib Dems from this Scottish election?
Well, it's funny, I started the day through in Glasgow with the BBC with like absolutely nothing to say because nothing had been declared, and now I'm at the tickly end where results are coming in thick and fast. Look, I'm not going to lie, obviously losing Shetland is a devastating result. Emma has been a fantastic candidate. The SNP ran a very good campaign. But, Alex was really clear, and we were very clear, I'm chairing the Scottish campaign, that we had these 10 target constituencies. And so far, obviously beyond Shetland and Argyll and Bute, which was always going to be a difficult one, we're still on track to deliver the majority of those. In fact, we already have, because now we have 6 with David in Caithness.
That's interesting. So, has your strategy been successful? Is that what you're saying, that it's worked?
Well, for a long part of the afternoon, we've been in second place, haven't we? So
Hang on, that doesn't matter. What's it going to look like tomorrow?
But it's interesting, isn't it? There's absolutely no doubt that as for a smaller party, that some of the challenge for us is that we dig in those constituencies. Which Lib Dem MSP has loved the most has been one of the questions today. But that does make it more difficult from a regional perspective. But I'm delighted to see Yippee Turvey elected in the North East list, which is just coming through. So that's great. That's a seat that obviously we've held previously. So we've demonstrated we can do it again. And, I'm obviously waiting, like us all, on tenterhooks in relation to the Highlands. And I've had conflicting reports on that all day. But, to see the Highlands come back to Lib Dems is very, very encouraging.
Are we in recount territory? Is that why it's late? Or is it just late because it's late?
I really don't know. I mean, I am obviously hoping at the moment that we're in general election 2024 territory, where when Alex Cole-Hamilton phoned me on the night of polling night and said, I think we can do Skye, Ross and Lochaber, and I might have told him where to get off. And then we did actually win it the following day. So, I'm trying to be as sanguine as I possibly can.
Can I ask you, Wendy, when we did at the start of this campaign, it feels like an eternity ago now, we interviewed all the party leaders.
Yes.
And, Alex Cole-Hamilton and I had a bit of a back and forth because I was putting it to him, surely now is the time for you to start really trying to progress your offer beyond what is, frankly, some pockets of areas in the Highlands, North East Fife in your constituency and, 1 or 2 in Edinburgh. So what is the strategy now to try and do that? And what's the next stage for the Liberal Democrats? How do you try and appeal to a greater electorate across a bigger geography?
Well, I mean, I think that's interesting, and we've got to probably look at it from a UK perspective. Ed Davies already been talking today, and he's coming up tomorrow, about the fact that there are in certain places that we are the pragmatic party that is the antidote to reform, but also the antidote to populism. And I think, it was interesting this morning, I'd got a couple of reports that actually in some places where we, literally hadn't been able to do anything beyond sort of electoral addresses, that we had picked up some votes, in Glasgow, for example. And so that did suggest to me that, that sort of turn-off that has been historically for the Lib Dems in the last decade is definitely wearing off. But now we have to think, absolutely, I agree with you about how we capitalise on that.
We've got the North East Scotland numbers for you. So the Conservatives have got 2, Reform UK have got 2, the Scottish Greens, Labour and the Liberal Democrats have all got 1 each.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Well, as I say, delighted for IPI, but that's, again, I think I agree with Andy that Reform are underperforming with 2, but Labour just the 1.
Yeah.
I mean, this is looking like it's going to be a terrible
so
night
that
for
just
them.
obviously North East Scotland's my patch.
Yeah, you've got to come in.
Well, to be clear, and for the benefit again of our listeners, that the Liberal Democrats didn't have a seat in the North East, so they gained there. So kind of partly answering my question, establish a ground.
But also, in fairness, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but obviously it was the one where we came closest to at the last election, it should have been the easiest one for us to gain.
But you also just the point about Labour is well made. They've lost a seat in the North East. Perhaps unsurprising. I think oil and gas will have featured quite heavily in that, but that's very interesting indeed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I suppose there's a bit of chicken and egg here. I mean, it's possible, looking at the numbers, the Lib Dems are probably actually 6th in Parliament, right? However, on double the number of MSPs that you had before. I think, I've made this point before, as you know, about the sort of antidote to populism, and if you had to create a party that was the antidote to populism, it would look a lot like the Lib Dems. It's not catching fire quite yet, but if you look at it strategically, the Lib Dems are probably the sort of pro-UK party that has the best chance of accelerating somewhere. I wonder, from your point of view, looking at the building behind us and what's going to be happening, we've just said to Mark Diffley's just agreed basically that the SNP floor is 56.
Yeah.
So to get to a majority from 56, that's 9 seats.
Yeah.
How strategically important is it for the Lib Dems to be able to hold that balance of power and do what you've done for the last 2 years, which is to extract concessions in budgets, look at legislation, all that sort of thing? Getting to that 9 is, I would suggest, pretty important for you so that you can get the SNP to 65. Yeah,
it's interesting how sort of the Westminster narrative does sort of infect our politics, because this is all positioned on the SNP winning a majority, but that place behind us was never set up to do that. And actually, I think one of the saddest things about sort of the last decade, and that's the decade that I came into politics, before 2015 I was not a politician in any way, shape or form, is that we have seen a more polarising debate where it becomes the extremes. The budget decision at the start of the year, that was a really difficult one for our party to make, because on the one hand, you want to be pragmatic. The SNP were trying very, very hard to be friendly with us, because it was obviously, for their optics, much better to be seen to be treating with us rather than the Greens. But by the same token, the political narrative means that could have been politically quite difficult for us.
You've not been punished for that at all.
I think I've got some good news for you.
Oh, here we go.
I'm going to put Kate Forbes on the spot here. She's going to hate me saying this, but she just texted me to say that she thinks Lib Dems have won by tens of votes in Loch Skye and Badenloch. Yeah. So you've maybe clinched that, another gain for the Liberal Democrats.
Is this Angus Macdonald being right again?
We're going to have to please
as Chief Whip at Westminster, goodness.
Yeah. Well, he's got to win Inverness as well.
And another quick update for you from Team Swinney. I'm afraid we were hoping that he was going to pop past and just go in here, but he said he can't do. He's got off to Butte House. Apparently he's got something important to discuss. I can't imagine what, but he will do a special with us in the coming days. So that's useful.
Oh, that's very good.
I added that last bit, but now I'm holding it to it.
Thanks very much, Geoff. Well, it's committed to tape now, isn't it? It's committed. That's good stuff.
Just what I was just getting to in there. I know there have always been concerns in the Lib Dems about the impact of doing a deal with the SNP at Holyrood, and what that does, because we're so polarised, what that does to unionist voters. No evidence here at all, I don't think, that you've been punished by unionist voters for doing those deals.
No, but I would also say that at the moment, obviously we've just had the one list result, but in those other seats, we were fighting the SNP, and that's been our narrative. So obviously voters in those seats were looking for something different than the government or the party that is going to be the government. Alex has been very clear. 2 decades of. I find it really interesting because just as a sort of person who's always had an interest in politics, never thought I would end up here. But there's always a point where the political wheel turns, and there's no doubt that the constitutional debate in Scotland has meant that the SNP's floor is simply higher than other parties. But actually, I think there would be a general consensus that a time out of power wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for the party, whether that in terms of the party itself or, dare I say it, the constitution. And again, we're not ending up in that scenario. So, we've been clear, 2 decades, that's enough. But, I would also say that I know the MSPs that are coming to Holyrood so far, and I know that they want to be pragmatic and do what's best for the communities.
Yeah. One final, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you, Wendy. It's been a long day. I just wanted to ask a question about where your work is at Westminster and a wee comment on the situation that the Labour face just now. I mean, it looks pretty cataclysmic.
It really does.
How do you see that unfolding? Can Keir Starmer, will he last? How do you? Because I mean, we're going to forget about Holyrood pretty quickly, I think, guys, because the focus is going to be on the future of the Prime Minister. How do you see that unfolding?
I mean, this is one of the things where you've got to give the Tories credit. They are much better at this kind of stuff when their leader is in real difficulty. And so there is a bit for me that just feels like...
Ruthless, I think, is the word.
Yeah. They do regicide pretty well. But I just think there is no real appetite and no obvious contender. But we are getting to the point where we're about to reach the midpoint of the Parliament in Westminster. And, there seems that Starmer will not lead the Labour Party at the next election, but they've got to surely give any leader as much lead-in time as they possibly can.
There's a deficit in vision. That's the problem, isn't it? Any of these potential contenders for leadership, we don't know what any of them stand for.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why today has been so interesting. The results have been so interesting because, you sometimes don't know what the question the electorate is going to answer. And I'm still not quite sure at the results what the question is that majority of voters have asked themselves in the polling station yesterday. But I think the thing that's most unforgivable about Labour at Westminster is we knew from 18 months, 2 years out, that the election question of the general election 2024 was anyone but the Conservatives. And obviously we were able to, as Liberal Democrats, completely maximise on that, where we were able to establish ourselves as the credible contenders at Westminster. Labour won that majority and had absolutely no idea and direction how to do that, whether communicating that to the country, but actually very importantly communicating that to its group of MPs, which means that those groups of MPs have splintered off. I mean, how many tribes are we talking about in Labour now? Is it 6? Is it 7? As opposed to the 5 tribes that we saw in the Conservatives.
And incidentally, none of the contenders are able to bring that party together. I mean, I've never, well, as you know, I've always felt that the Starmer's going to go tomorrow thing has been pretty overpriced, because do you really want it? It's like a new captain for the Titanic after it's hit the iceberg, right? So, I mean,
from my perspective, sitting there as Chief Whip, I'm now, I don't know how quite I've managed this, but I'm the longest serving Chief Whip at Westminster now. Obviously, I had a much smaller group prior to 2024. But, when that last reshuffle happened, Labour took place, they took everybody bar 3 whips out of that whip's office. And I just don't think that was a good idea in terms of, actually, at the end of the day, people might not like the whips and might not like some things you do, but you need to have the relationships so that where the proverbial might hit the fan or where there's an issue, you have the confidence that they will pick up the phone to their whip. And I think that is just absolutely not the case for the UK government currently. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're in the difficulties they are. Because not only do they not have the answers, but they actually don't even know the questions that their backbenchers are asking.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Wendy, thank you so much. It's great to see you. Can I just ask, as a kind of chair of a campaign, what do you do this evening? What happens now?
I'm probably going to head back to 4 Clifton Terrace. I've also got a son.
What's at 4 Clifton Terrace?
So that's our HQ. Yeah. But I'm also going to head, I'm keeping a running commentary. My son, my husband, as well as being an SNP member, is also a mad jambo. And he has, and my son is too. He's heading up from Birmingham. And so I've been keeping track of him on his train because he ended up having to sprint down the platform and crew to get get on. So,
Classic.
And Folclift and
things that you
Terrace
do
is
for your
right
team.
opposite Haymarket Station as well.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to maybe make it all come together. That would be very nice. But Ed Davies obviously coming up tonight as well.
Is he
and
bringing his
hoping to celebrate
wetsuit,
tomorrow.
a canoe, a bungee jump? What's he doing?
Campaign's over, don't need
To
to
be
do that
honest,
anymore.
true,
as
yeah.
long as it's not a peach suit, I'm okay with that.
Very good. Wendy Chamberlain, thank you so
Thank
much.
you very
Great
much,
to see you.
Thanks very much.
Wendy Chamberlain is Lib Dem MP for North East Fife and was chairing the Lib Dems campaign in Scotland. I thought what she said there about what question have voters answered. I don't know if you guys have got a thought on that. I know she's sprung it on us, but I think that's a really good thing for us to consider in the days ahead.
So I rattled a few cages when I was on BBC today.
It's not like you,
listen,
Jeffrey.
I was being very complimentary about the SNP, as you'd imagine, because they've won the election and it's the ultimate results business is politics. But I also kind of pointed out that, that across the country, and people should remember this, the SNP in almost every constituency, apart from John Swinney's and Shetland, their vote went down, and in some constituencies quite considerably. And I was just making the point that I don't think the SNP should mischaracterise this election result. I think that they've done enough to suggest that, the people have gone, okay, we'll give you another shot. But I don't think it's an overwhelming positive endorsement of their record in government. And I still think that they have to recognise some of the deficiencies that there have been, and government with more conviction, purpose, but deliver things on the ground and evidence that to the population. And I think, I'm the first to admit, well done, John Swinney. This is outstanding for him, personally, his career as well. But equally, there's a hell of a lot of work to be done, frankly. And I think it has to be a lot better, because there's a lot of people out there expecting better from this place behind us.
So I think that's the question. I mean, if I was John Swinney tonight, I'd be saying, what does the normal person want me to do now? What does the normal person in the country want me to do? Not what does the SNP member want me to do? Not the card carrying member, not the person who goes on marches, not the flag wavers. What does the normal person want me to do? And I just think
he's got license to do that.
He has. Of course he has, and he deserves license to do that, because frankly, if he hadn't overtaken the SNP, I know we've talked about Starmer and all that sort of thing but I think you have to give John Swinney credit. If he had not taken the SNP a couple of years ago, they would not be in the position that they're in. It just wouldn't be. So, but at the same time, he is going from a situation where the last SNP mandate in 2021 was 47% of the vote and 64 MSPs.
Yeah, 44% of the vote, 64 seats.
It's now, let's say for the sake of argument, 38% of the vote. We don't know where it's going to end up. And 50-something, it looks like, MSPs. Yeah. It's a big drop. It's a good result, but it is a big drop. Yeah. And I just think and he's got 5 years to do all this. I mean, I think at this point, there is a reason, I think, for him to say, you know what, we actually just need to go a little bit back to basics here. People probably don't want us to immediately start having a debate about Section 30s and independence and all that sort of thing. Yeah. I could do with actually running this place a little bit better, and then we might be able to have that conversation a little bit further down the road. It's a bit. I know that he's won convincingly. I do consider it to be a landslide, but it's a big deficit on 2021.
Well, perhaps we're stopping or where we started. And here's the thing. I don't know, we haven't the benefit of what John's just said on his media interviews, but I'm certain this will have been the first question, because, okay, you haven't met your threshold that you yourself set. So how do you deal with the issue of Scottish independence? And I don't know, Calum, I know you're looking furiously to see if he's responded to that yet.
Well, I've got a couple of quotes. This isn't obviously the full interview. He says, I'm absolutely delighted the SNP's won the election and will be the largest party by a very commanding margin over our rivals. We'll wait to see until the full results that come out. They're not all out yet. Whatever circumstances we face, I will be acting to serve the people of Scotland and to improve their lives. The First Minister said he was certain of a pro-independence majority in Holyrood. He said he hoped Downing Street learned to respect the Scottish Government through Labour's election losses. They've got a lot of listening to do, this is a quote, to the fact that Labour have been hammered here in Scotland, and an SNP government after 19 years in office has just been emphatically returned to office.
So he's not dealt with the issue.
Well, no, not those quotes. That's
no, but fair play. No, and listen, let's give him a bit of grace. Like, you've just won the election. But
he's going to have to answer it.
But it's coming. Yeah. It's coming, and I'm genuinely intrigued to see, because he's going to have a lot of pressure from, the wider party movement members to make a push for independence, but he also knows that he set that threshold, because right now anyone in Westminster, whoever the Prime Minister is, if it's Keir Starmer or anyone else, will say, but you said outright majority, you haven't met that threshold, no chance. And that's what's going to happen. So how do you deal with that?
And the business community, the growth community more generally, and just a lot of your kind of centrist, apolitical people in the country, I think we'd be quite disappointed with them if that's what he focused on, to be honest. I really do. I think I think they probably like him. Well, we can see from polls. They like him more than like anybody else. I think they understand that he's competent, he's intelligent, he's a safe pair of hands to be in the highest office in the land. But I do think people want him to get stuff done.
How do you sculpt this first chapter then of a kind of new administration?
Yeah.
People often refer to 100 days, and it's a little bit.
Andy, you can go home. I'll take this one.
People often refer to the first 100 days, which is helpful but a bit arbitrary. So what do you do? You need energy. You need to get moving.
Yeah, so I said earlier on, real focus on, first of all, right, he's looking at all his MSPs that he's got elected. Him and his advisors will be looking at the pool of talent that he has. And then they're going to start putting together who their cabinet secretary picks are, what portfolios. There'll be a slight amendment to portfolios. There usually is after an election to try and fit what they see as the public's priorities, and then you'll have your junior ministers underneath that. And that will all happen. We've got the MSP swearing in next week, and then we think thereafter, the week after, you'll have the election of the First Minister, and then he'll start appointing his cabinet. That's the first sign to the public. I mean, who are you going to put in the key economy position? Who are you going to put in the health position? Who are you going to put in education? Who are you going to put in justice? And people start to get an idea of, the personalities behind this, and it'll give an indication of his intent. But yes, to Andy's point, let's leave independence to one side for a second, how he's going to deal with that. I would actually, and I agree with you, get 2 or 3 things down, make your first few visits very meaningful, that give an indication of how a Swinney government is actually going to approach its administration. And, and that's really important, because you set the tone for your government. And John has to, regardless... I know obviously Joanna Cherry was pretty sceptical of what's gone before, and that's entirely her view, and she's entitled to it. But I have always felt, a Salmond government was different to a Sturgeon government, and so should a Swinney government be different to a Sturgeon government. And he's got an opportunity to define who he is as a leader and the country that he seeks to aspire and govern.
Just one important point as well we're getting slightly ahead of ourselves over the next couple of weeks, but I don't think either of us ever thought it was going to happen anyway, but the idea of a coalition is dead, really. It looks to me like he's going to be able to get over the line with the support of any one single party. He's not going to need to cobble together multiple parties to get stuff done.
Andy.
It's really important.
That's an important point.
So SNP plus one party will get him anything he wants. So he might go to the Lib Dems, he might go to the Greens, he might even go to Labour for some things. Yeah. So he just doesn't need any formal agreement now. I don't think he's going to...
And go to the Tories. There was a briefing. Ivan McKee said we're going to cut income tax at some point in the Parliament. Yeah, go to the Tories. Show that kind of consensus that he's talked about in his statement there. That would be an interesting move.
Just on that, so you know, the latest forecast from the BBC, who are just over there somewhere in a far lesser setting than us, says this on seats: SNP 58, Reform 16, Labour 16, Greens 14, Conservatives 13, and Lib Dems 7.
And how many counts to go?
Oh gosh, that's on a separate bit of paper. Hang on a second till I tell you. We've had 91 out of 129 seats.
Right, okay.
So Lib Dems
it's going to be very close for second place, isn't it?
Yeah,
Lib Dems 7. I was just going to look at my phone there, and I've just got a text from my best pal saying, "Stop looking at your phone."
So I got one from my
Thanks for watching the live stream.
We've got 2 people watching, and that's only bloody 2 people incident.
Let's
wrap this thing up. I'm genuinely wanting to go to the pub.
I know you are. I just want to put a couple of things to you. So first of all, a couple of comments from you who've been watching on YouTube. Thank you very much for these. Vintage says the election results is because voters still vote on the Constitution and nothing else. The yes vote coalesces around the SNP. As Greens only stand on the list, the no vote splits between 4 parties. Worth saying, Ross Greer's out saying everyone in Scotland is going to have a Green MSP after today, which I thought was just an interesting...
It's a good line.
It's a good line, exactly that. JW20 says Scotland back firmly in its box. Have a look at the diabolical turnout, which is something to think about actually when we get the overall number. This person says there's nobody to vote for. Indie voters were sold down the river by Sturgeon, and now Scotland is left with nothing. And Jim C67 says Geoff and Andy did well on the telly.
Oh.
I was only on for about 30 seconds, but that's thanks, Jim.
You're not bitter about it, though.
What
are
a
you?
30 seconds, though, pal.
Right, a couple of just very final thoughts. We should reflect, he's not the only one, but Stephen Flynn is going to make the move from Westminster to Holyrood. He's become an MSP, and he's promised, Geoff, to be the voice of oil and gas in the North East.
So 2 points here before me. I'll come back to that in a second. We're going to have 2 by-elections.
Yes.
Coming
Stephen
up,
Gethin's
very soon. Stephen Gethin's one in Dundee
Sort of
East.
Arbroath.
Wasn't it?
Oh,
Or,
sorry. I
Well,
think
no, that's his
that's a Scottish
parliamentary
his-
seat.
yeah, so he's going to have a. Oh, sorry, so he's going to have a Westminster by-election there. Obviously, Aberdeen South will be a Westminster
Andy
by-election.
Burnham, come on down. 2
Yeah.
constituencies waiting for you.
Yeah.
No, there you go,
Steady,
that's
son. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, on the oil and gas thing, I thought that was really interesting, actually. And we'll maybe talk about this in a future podcast. I noticed how Jack Middleton, when he won Aberdeen Central, said something very similar to Stephen Flynn. And I just wonder if Stephen Flynn's flexing his muscles a bit, saying, OK, I came very close. The Tories ran him very close, by the way, and he thought, look, I think he wants to be a bit more outspoken about the energy sector in the northeast of Scotland. Will that be the shape of things to come? Will he be appointed a cabinet secretary? Very interesting.
And Andy, we've talked on this podcast before in the build-up to this election about how much of a refresh this Parliament will now have as a result of the number of MSPs who have stood down, they're not returning, etc., etc. And I just wonder, actually, if in the run us through a couple of the party implications, but on the SNP, just to follow on from that, whether people like Stephen Flynn, Jack Middleton, etc., a bunch of others as well, whether they're part of a kind of new generation that helps John Swinney escape what you were talking about on the podcast last week, the kind of influence of Nicola Sturgeon actually over this party. Is there a refresh like that in the SNP, and then think about the other parties too?
I think that's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Because, I must admit, I think there's a little bit of concern about the number of new SNP MSPs who will have been either councillors or party staff or whatever it was before, because you're kind of already half in that situation. You'll have made up your mind about a lot of these things already because you've been working for an MSP or you've been a councillor or whatever it might be. There are, I think, at my count, 8 or 9 former MPs for the SNP who are now up here as well. I think that could be interesting because that will bring a different dynamic.
And a bit more depth for the SNP, which is arguably needed.
I think that's right. And then that comes back to Geoff's points about forming a cabinet and all of that sort of stuff as well. I don't think, fundamentally to answer your question, I don't think John Swinney will be unhappy at the scale of the turnover in the group. It's his election, it's his mandate, and now it's largely his group as well. So I think he'll be pretty satisfied at that on a conceptual level.
And I think, that potentially deeper talent pool with experience at, in a national parliament will be helpful to him, because you've got to govern for 5 years. There'll be a reshuffle there. You want to try and keep the thing fresh with people that have got talent. So, and I should say, people like Jim Fairley, Ivan McKee, that are there as well. Are they going to be elevated to cabinet secretary positions? They've been decent junior ministers. What about the existing cabinet? How are they going to be treated?
Those two have been more than decent junior. I mean, they have got to be cabinet secretary.
Jim's really impressed me, I have to say. And I think Ivan's probably going to get a public sector reform brief. That's going to be really important. But, there is existing people there. John's going to have to try and keep them happy as well as keeping the country happy. That's just kind of going back to what we're saying earlier on. Really fascinating to see.
Just a couple of concluding points then. That just as we're speaking, Inverness and Nairn is an SNP hold for Emma Roddick, and Fergus Ewing came in third.
That must have been it was a very small majority over the Lib Dems.
But, and a reduced majority actually for the SNP. So Emma Roddick with 30.4% of the vote, the Lib Dems in second with 29.2%, so it's a pretty close run thing, and Fergus Ewing in third with 21.3% of the vote.
Look, well done to Emma Roddick, great for her. I am a wee bit disappointed. I think Fergus Ewing as a voice of holding the government, whoever that might have been, to account, and obviously he is a veteran of Scottish politics. He's a bit of a legend of Scottish politics, whether you agree with him or not. And to not have a Ewing now, for the first time, not having a Ewing in the Scottish Parliament and devolution, quite something.
Winning a constituency as an independent is near on impossible.
Yeah, I know.
I
thought he had a chance.
I wish he had stood on the list. It actually would have been easier for him,
of course,
to have won if he'd stood on the Highlands and Islands list and given him a wider region as well. However, he didn't, and he lost.
21.3% of the vote is not to be sniffed at.
It's not to be sniffed at, no.
Just as we conclude then, let me tell you that Holyrood Sources have been extremely proud to be brought to you this evening by the Scotch Whisky Association's Made to be Measured campaign. Many adults who choose to drink alcohol do so without careful measurements or knowing how many units they're consuming. The Scotch Whisky Association's Made to be Measured campaign strives to change this by encouraging us all to savour our Scotch. Scotland's national drink, which became a focal point of this campaign, is made to be measured, crafted with care, and should always be enjoyed responsibly. You can find out more at scotch-whisky.org.uk/made to be measured. And we are very grateful for the SWA's support for our podcast this evening. Guys, thank you very much indeed. That's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're listening afterwards, thank you so much for listening. This is the Holyrood Sources podcast. We drop into your feed every single week with analysis of Scottish politics and policy making. We've got a brand new parliament to analyse in the weeks ahead. Subscribe now on YouTube or on your podcast app and make sure you never miss an episode again. Thank you so much. We will talk to you again soon.